Section 31 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Li Jing. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1, by Cao Xueqin. Translated by Henry Bancroft Jolly. Chapter 14, Part 2. But without going into further details on this subject, we shall now return to Pao Yu. Seeing that there were a lot of people about, and fearing lest Ch'in Chung might receive some offense, he lost no time in coming along with him to sit over at Lady Feng's. Lady Feng was just having her repast, and upon seeing them arrive, "Your legs are long enough, and couldn't you have come somewhat quicker?" she laughingly observed. "We've had our rice, thanks," replied Pao Yu. "Have you had it," inquired lady Feng, "outside here, or over on the other side?" "Would we eat anything with all that riffraff?" exclaimed Pao Yu. "We've really had it over there, in fact. I now come after having had mine with dowager lady Chia." As he uttered these words, they took their seats. Lady Feng had just finished her meal, when a married woman from the Ning mansion came to get an order to obtain an advance of money to purchase incense and lanterns with. "I calculated," observed lady Feng, "that you would come to day to make a requisition, but I was under the impression that you had forgotten. Had you really done so, you would certainly have had to get them on your own account, and I would have been the one to benefit." "Didn't I forget? I did," rejoined the married woman as she smiled, "and it's only a few minutes back that it came to my mind. Had I been 1 second later, I wouldn't have been in time to get the things." These words ended, she took over the order and went off. Entries had, at the time, to be made in the books, and orders to be issued, and Ch'in Chung was induced to interpose with a smirk. "In both these mansions of yours, such orders are alike in use, but were any outsider stealthily to counterfeit one and to abscond, after getting the money, what could ever be done?" "In what you say," replied lady Feng, "you take no account of the laws of the land." "How is it that from our house no one comes to get any orders or to obtain anything?" Pao Yu having inquired. "At the time they come to fetch them," rejoined lady Feng, "you're still dreaming. But let me ask you one thing: when will you two at last begin your evening course of studies?" "Oh, I wish we were able to begin our studies this very day," Pao Yu added. "That would be the best thing. But they are very slow in putting the schoolroom in order, so that there's no help for it." Lady Feng laughed. "Had you asked me," she remarked, "I can assure you it would have been ready quick enough." "You two would have been of no use," observed Pao Yu, "for it will certainly be ready by the time they ought to finish it in." "But in order that they should do the work," suggested lady Feng, "it's also necessary that they should have the material. They can't do without them, and if I don't give them any permits, it will be difficult to obtain them." Pao Yu at these words readily drew near to lady Feng, and there and then applied for the permits. "My dear sister," he added, "do give them the permits to enable them to obtain the material and effect the repairs." "I feel quite sore from fatigue," ventured lady Feng, "and how can I stand you rubbing against me? But compose your mind. They have this very day got the paper, and gone to paste it, and would they, for whatever they need, have still waited until they had been sent for? They are not such fools after all." Pao Yu would not believe it, and lady Feng at once called Ts'ai Ming to look up the list, which she handed for Pao Yu's inspection. But while they were arguing, a servant came in to announce that Chao Erh, who had gone to Su Chow, had returned; and lady Feng all in a flurry directed that he should be asked to walk in. Chao Erh bent one knee and paid his obeisance. "Why have you come back?" lady Feng readily inquired. "Mr. Secondus Chia," he reported, "sent me back to tell you that Mr. Lin, our dowager lady's son-in-law, died on the 3rd of the 9th moon; that Master Secondus is taking Miss Lin along with him to escort the coffin of Mr. Lin as far as Suzhou, and that they hope to be back some time about the end of the year. Master dispatched me to come and announce the news, to bring his compliments, and to crave our old lady's instructions, as well as to see how you are getting on in my lady's home. He also bade me take back to him a few long fur pelisses." "Have you seen any one else besides me?" lady Feng inquired. "I've seen every one," rejoined Chao Erh, and withdrew hastily at the conclusion of this remark, out of the apartment, while lady Feng turned towards Pao yü with a smile and said, "Your cousin Lin can now live in our house for ever." "Poor thing!" exclaimed Pao yü. "I presume that during all these days she has wept who knows how much." And saying this, he wrinkled his brow and heaved a deep sigh. Lady Feng saw Chao Erh on his return, but as she could not very well, in the presence of third persons, make minute inquiries about Chia Lien, she had to continue a prey to inward solicitude till it was time to go home. For, not having got through what she had to do, she was compelled to wait patiently until she went back in the evening, when she again sent word for Chao Erh to come in, and asked him with all minuteness whether the journey had been pleasant throughout, and for full particulars. That very night, she got in readiness the long pelisses, which she herself, with the assistance of P'ing Erh, packed up in a bundle, and after careful thought as to what things he would require, she put them in the same bundle and committed them to Chao Erh's care. She went on to solicitously impress upon Chao Erh to be careful in his attendance aboard. "Don't provoke your masters to wrath," she said, "and from time to time to advise him not to drink too much wine, and don't entice him to make the acquaintance of any low people; for if you do, when you come back I will cut your legs off." The preparations were hurriedly and confusedly completed, and it was already the 4th watch of the night when she went to sleep. But soon again the day dawned, and after hastily performing her toilet and ablutions, she came over to the Ning mansion. As Chia Chen realized that the day for escorting the body away was drawing nigh, he in person went out in a curricle, along with geomancers, to the temple of the Iron Fence to inspect a suitable place for depositing the coffin. He also, point by point, enjoined the resident managing bonds, Si K'ung, to mind and get ready brand new articles of decoration and furniture, and to invite a considerable number of bonzes of note to be at hand to lend their services for the reception of the coffin. Si K'ung lost no time in getting ready the evening meal, but Chia Chen had, in fact, no wish for any tea or rice; and as the day was far advanced, and he was not in time to enter the city, he had, after all, to rest during that night as best he could in a chaste room in the temple. The next morning, as soon as it was day, he hastened to come into the city and to make every preparation for the funeral. He likewise deputed messengers to proceed ahead to the temple of the Iron Fence to give, that very night, additional decorative touches to the place where the coffin was to be deposited, and to get ready tea and all the other necessaries for the use of the persons who would be present at the reception of the coffin. Lady Feng, seeing that the day was not far distant, also apportioned duties and made provision for everything beforehand with circumspect care, while at the same time she chose in the Jung mansion such carriages, sedan chairs and retinues as were to accompany the cortege, in attendance upon Madame Wang, and gave her mind furthermore to finding a place where she herself could put up in at the time of the funeral. About this very time, it happened that the consort of the Duke Shan Kuo departed this life, and that Mesdames Wang and Xing had likewise to go and offer sacrifices, and to follow the burial procession; that the birthday occurred of the consort of Prince Hsi An, that presents had to be forwarded on the occasion of this anniversary, and that the consort of the Duke of Chen Kuo gave birth to first child, a son, and congratulatory gifts had, in like manner, to be provided. Besides, her uterine brother Wang Ren was about to return south, with all his family, and she had too to write her home letters, to send her reverent compliments to her father and mother, as well as to get the things ready that were to be taken along. There was also Ying Ch'un, who had contracted some illness, and the doctor had every day to be sent for, and medicines to be administered, the notes of the doctor to be looked after, consisting of the bulletins of the diagnosis and the prescriptions, with the result that the various things that had to be attended to by lady Feng were so manifold that it would, indeed, be difficult to give an exhaustive idea of them. In addition to all this, the day for taking the coffin away was close at hand, so that lady Feng was so hard pressed for time that she had even no desire for any tea to drink or anything to eat, and that she could not sit or rest in peace. As soon as she put her foot into the Ning mansion, the inmates of the Jung mansion would follow close upon her heels, and the moment she got back into the Jung mansion, the servants again of the Ning mansion would follow her about. In spite, however, of this great pressure, lady Feng, whose natural disposition had ever been to try and excel, was urged to strain the least of her energies, as her sole dread was lest she could incur unfavourable criticism from any one, and so excellent were the plans she devised, that every one in the clan, whether high or low, readily conceded her unlimited praise. On the night of this day, the body had to be watched, and in the inner suite of apartments 2 companies of young players as well as jugglers entertained the relatives, friends and other visitors during the whole of the night. Mrs. Yu was still laid up in the inside room, so that the whole task of attending to and entertaining the company devolved upon lady Feng alone, who had to look after everything; for though there were, in the whole clan, many sisters-in-law, some there were too bashful to speak, others too timid to stand on their feet, while there were also those who were not accustomed to meet in company, and those likewise who were afraid of people of high estate and shy of officials. Of every kind there were, but the whole number of them could not come up to lady Feng's standard, whose deportment was correct, and whose speech was according to rule. Hence it was that she did not even so much as heed any of that large company, but gave directions and issued orders, adopting any course of action which she fancied, just as if there were no bystander. The whole night, the lanterns emitted a bright light and the fires brilliant rays, while guests were escorted on their way out and officials greeted on their way in, but of this hundredfold bustle and stir nothing need, of course, be said. The next morning at the dawn of day, and at a propitious moment, 64 persons, dressed all alike in blue, carried the coffin, preceded by a streamer with the record in large characters: "Coffin of lady Ch'in, a lady of the 5th degree, by marriage of the Chia mansion, deceased at the middle age, consort of the grandson of the Ningguo duke, with the 1st rank title of honour, whose status is a guard of the imperial antechamber, charged with the protection of the inner palace and roads in the red prohibited city." The various paraphernalia and ornaments were all brand new, hurriedly made for the present occasion, and the uniform lustrous brilliancy they shed was sufficient to dazzle the eyes. Pao Chu, of course, observed the rites prescribed for unmarried daughters, and dashed the bow and walked by the coffin, as she gave way to most bitter lamentations. At that time, among the officials who escorted the funeral procession, were Niu Jizong, the grandson of the Zhenguo duke, who had now inherited the status of Earl of the 1st degree; Liu Fang, the grandson of Liu Biao, Duke of Li Kuo, who had recently inherited the rank of Viscount of the 1st class; Chen Ruiwen, a grandson of Chen Yi, Duke of Qi Kuo, who held the hereditary rank of General of the 3rd degree, with the prefix of majestic authority; Ma Shang, the grandson of Ma Kui, Duke of Zhi Kuo, by inheritance General of the 3rd rank with the prefix of majesty afar; Hou Shaokang, an hereditary Viscount of the 1st degree, grandson of the Duke of Hsiu Kuo, Hou Xiaoming by name; while the death of the consort of the Duke of Shan Kuo had obliged his grandson Shi Guangzhu to go into mourning, so that he could not be present. These were the 6 families which had, along with the 2 households of Jung and Ning, been, at one time, designated the 8 dukes. Among the rest, there were besides the grandson of the prince of Nan'an, the grandson of the prince of Hsi'an, Shi Ding, marquis of Chongjing, Jiang Zining, and hereditary baron of the second grade, grandson of the earl of Pingyuan; Xie Jing, and hereditary baron of the second order and captain of the metropolitan camp, grandson of the marquis of Dingcheng; Qi Jianhui, and hereditary baron of the second rank, a grandson of the marquis of Xiangyang; Qiu Liang, in command of the 5 cities, grandson of the marquis of Jingtian. The remainder were Wei Qi, the son of the earl of Jingxiang; Feng Ziying, the son of a general, whose prefix was supernatural martial spirit; Chen Yejun, Wei Ruolan, and others, grandsons and sons of princes who could not be enumerated. In the way of ladies, there were also in all about 10 large official sedan chairs full of them, 30 or 40 private chairs, and including the official and non-official chairs, and carriages containing inmates of the household, there must have been over 110, so that with the various kinds of paraphernalia, articles of decoration, and hundreds of knickknacks, which preceded, the vast expanse of the cortege covered a continuous line extending over 3 or 4 li. They had not been very long on their way, when they reached variegated sheds soaring high by the roadside, in which banquets were spread, feasts laid out, and music discoursed in unison. These were the viatory sacrificial offerings contributed by the respective families. The first shed contained the sacrificial donations of the mansion of the prince of Dongping; the second shed those of the prince of Nan'an; the third those of prince of Xining; and the fourth those of the prince of Peking. Indeed, of these 4 princes, the reputation enjoyed in former days by the prince of Peking had been the most exalted, and to this day his sons and grandsons still succeeded to the inheritance of the princely dignity. The present incumbent of the princedom of Peking, Shui Rong, had not as yet come of age, but he was gifted with the presence of exceptional beauty, and with a disposition condescending and genial. At the demise, recently, of the consort of the eldest grandson of the mansion of Ningguo, he, in consideration of the friendship which had formerly existed between the 2 grandfathers, by virtue of which they had been inseparable, both in adversity as well as in prosperity, treating each other as if they had not been of different surnames, was consequently induced to pay no regard to princely dignity or to his importance, but having like the others paid, on the previous day, his condolences and presented sacrificial offerings, he had further now raised a shed wherein to offer libations. Having directed every one of his subordinate officers to remain in this spot in attendance, he himself went at the 5th watch to court, and when he acquitted himself of his public duties, he forthwith changed his attire for mourning costume, and came along, in an official sedan chair, preceded by gongs and umbrellas. Upon reaching the front of the shed, the chair was deposited on the ground, and as his subordinate officers pressed on either side and waited upon him, neither the military nor the populace, which composed the mass of people, ventured to make any commotion. In a short while, the long procession of the Ning mansion became visible, spreading far and wide, covering in its course from the north the whole ground like a silver mountain. At an early hour, the forerunners, messengers, and other attendants on the staff of the Ning mansion apprised Chia Chen of the presence of the sheds, and Chia Chen with all alacrity gave orders that the foremost part of the cortege should halt. Attended by Chia She and Chia Zhen, the 3 of them came with hurried step to greet the Prince of Peking, whom they saluted with due ceremony. Shui Rong, who was seated in his sedan chair, made a bow and returned their salutations with a smile, proceeding to address them and to treat them, as he had done hitherto, as old friends, without any airs of self-importance. "My daughter's funeral has," observed Chia Chen, "put your highness to the trouble of coming, an honor which we, though noble by birth, do not deserve." Shui Rong smiled. "With the terms of friendship," he added, "which have existed for so many generations between our families, is there any need for such apologies?" Turning his head round there and then, he gave directions to the senior officer of his household to preside at the sacrifices and to offer libations in his stead. And Chia She and the others stood together on one side and made obeisance in return, and then came in person again and gave expression to their gratitude for his bounty. Shih Jung was most affable and complaisant. "Which is the gentleman," he inquired of Chia Cheng, "who was born with a piece of jade in his mouth? I've long had a wish to have the pleasure of seeing him, and as he's sure to be on the spot on an occasion like this, why shouldn't you invite him to come round?" Chia Cheng speedily drew back, and bidding Pao Yu change his mourning clothes, he led him forward and presented him. Pao Yu had all along heard that Shih Jung was a worthy prince, perfect in ability as well as in appearance, pleasant and courteous, not bound down by any official custom of state right, so that he had repeatedly felt a keen desire to meet him. With the sharp control, however, which his father exercised over him, he had not been able to gratify his wish. But on this occasion, he saw on the contrary that he came to call him, and it was all but natural that he should be delighted. Whilst advancing, he scrutinized Shih Jung with the corner of his eye, who, seated as he was in the sedan chair, presented an imposing sight. But, reader, what occurred on his approach is not yet known, but listen to the next chapter, which will divulge it. Section 31